Thank you very much for tuning in. Hello, everybody. I'm Theo Alessandratos. This is a paper with Torsten Smura from NTU as well, and Jay Liang from University of Nottingham. When I submitted for the conference, we were looking for a title, hadn't settled it, just had to put something. So the title on which we settled is One Rule for Thee and Another for Me, Breaking Norms and Leadership. So what am I going to talk about to you today? We know that prosocial norms are important for the functioning of society. For example, the provision of public goods, and we have a lot of papers showing that. We also have quite a few papers showing that the leader's behavior influences the behavior of followers. And there are papers showing that also bad behavior of leaders leads to the bad behavior of followers and citizens. Our question is, what happens if the citizens abide by a norm and the leader breaks the norm, violates it? How do the norms and the leader's misbehavior interact with each other? What we do with this paper, we collect data on the norms related to the lockdown in the UK. We collected data in April this year. And in May, there was a natural experiment. The chief advisor of the Prime Minister of the UK broke the regulation. This was big news. It was all over the press and headlines in May. And then 10 days after the revelation of this misbehavior, we collected data again. And this time we had 3 treatments. One was a baseline, similar as in April. One was a break treatment where we informed the participants of the advisor's behavior. And the other was the counter treatment where we inform them of the advisor's behavior and we tell them what was the prevailing norm in April in our first round of the data collection. Now, what we find is that the break treatment has a weak negative effect, and I will explain what exactly we measure there. Counter has a strong negative effect. When you tell people that the citizens were abiding by a norm and remind them that the leader broke the norm, they behave even worse. We also have Google mobility data, which show that the revelation about the advisor's violation is followed by increased mobility of the UK population. So what we find is not confined to our experimental setting. There is some evidence that this misbehavior affected actual behavior. Now, as I said, the literature, there's a lot of literature on leadership. These are just 4 papers out of many. In the lab, we also have 2 recent papers that show the effect of leadership in the field. Both of them are actually about misbehavior and show that leaders misbehaving leads to citizens misbehaving too. And we have papers about which give the descriptive norm to participants. This paper, the Burstein one, shows that when you correct misperceptions about the descriptive norm regarding female labor participation in Saudi Arabia, husbands are more likely to allow their women to work. And the Smura and Weiss paper, which shows that when you tell other people about risk choices, they also shift the risk choices. There are other papers here as well. Now, let me give you a timeline of the events. On the 23rd of March, the Prime Minister here announced that there was going to be a lockdown in the UK. This was announced in a televised address, very public, and there was a very strong message, which was summarized as stay at home. Let me show you actually. This is one of the posters that the government put up and they circulated in the media and social media. Okay, the message was very, very clear. Stay at home, save lives. This stay at home part is going to be very important for us. Only go out to shop for basic necessities or pick up medicine. travel to work when you absolutely cannot work from home, go out to exercise only once a day with alone or with members of your family, do not meet others, even friends or family. This is also going to be important for us. And just to make sure that everybody had gotten the message, the day after the Prime Minister's address, they sent an SMS to everybody who said, new rules in force now, you must stay at home. Stay at home, protect the national healthcare system, save lives. And by all accounts, this worked. We can see it in the Google data, other data sets that have been released. Traffic data showed a 50-year low in April. People were abiding by the government guidelines. So on the 29th of April, we ran an experiment on Prolific. I don't know if anybody has heard of it. It's a service here in the UK. It's similar to Amazon Mechanical Turk, but there is some literature saying they have a better, they have better participants there. They suffer less from bots and people like that. So have 299 participants, half of them females. The average age is 46. Other things I haven't put here is they're somewhat more educated and richer than the average person in the UK. The whole experiment took about 16 minutes and they got paid £3.80, which is about the corresponding hourly wage is about 50% more than the minimum wage here in the UK. With experimental design, at first we asked them 2 questions about the personal behavior with respect to lockdown guidelines. I'll show you exactly what we asked them in the next slide. Then we listed the norm following the Krupka-Weber procedure, which I will also explain if anybody is not familiar with that. And then they play a trust game, a dictator game, and a public goods game. Now, each of these games, they played twice. One with a complier, which is a person that answered that they agree or slightly agree that they only go out to shop for basic necessities. And with a non-complier, which is a person who said that they slightly disagree that they only go out of the house to shop for basic necessities. Of course, we randomize the order, so not everybody plays with the complier first. This is randomized, whether you see complier or non-complier first. And we use the strategy method for this. So here is the first screen that they saw. Okay. Please pick the answer that best describes you personally. I only go outside for food, health reasons, or work if I cannot work from home. Agree, slightly agree, etc. We also asked their behavior with respect to the hands. This was because going out for food has an externality. Washing your hands is mostly about harming yourself. And then the Krupka-Weber norm elicitation. So now we asked them to guess what the majority of the participants chose, and we incentivize this choice. Okay, this is how this would be the first round playing with a complier. So you're now going to play this game with someone who responded they agree or slightly agree. And this will be the second round for this person. You're now going to play this game with someone who responded they disagree or slightly disagree, that they go outside for food, etc. Okay. So the results from the first round, which are more important to us because we had the norm this way, 85% said that they only went outside for food, health reasons, or work if they could not work from home. Only 3%, only 9 out of 300 said that they disagreed or slightly disagreed. So at least from what they said, it looks like there was a very strong norm in favor of compliance. And what you see here is the amount that the first mover sends to the receiver in the trust game. The red bars are the amount sent to non-compliers. Green bars, amounts sent to compliers. and you see that they clearly sent more to those complying. This is for the dictator game. Again, they sent more to those complying. And public good game, this was a group with 3 compliers or a group with 3 non-compliers. Similarly, they discriminate against non-compliers. Now, the natural experiment. On the 22nd of May, the press reveals the chief advisor to the prime minister had allegedly broken the rules. On the 23rd of May, more witnesses come forward. It becomes a very big thing in the press and the television. And then on the 24th of May, the prime minister, he was in the daily televised update regarding the pandemic, where he was asked a lot of questions for quite a bit of time. And this is a direct quote: "In every respect, he, the advisor, has acted responsibly, legally, and with integrity." There was a complete backing. The next day, the chief advisor gave a press conference where he said that he didn't regret what he did. No resignation or reprimand followed this thing. Okay. So on the 1st of June, we ran another round of the experiment on Prolific, 224 participants. Again, similar age, half females, a little bit longer this time, and 350 pounds on average. Now what we did, we asked them about their personal behavior with respect to lockdown guidelines again. But now, when we asked them for the normal elicitation, we had an intervention. Let me show you. So this is the baseline again. And then here is the break treatment. So we tell them these are, well, not quotes, but they're based off of the chief advisor's press conference quotes, because we try to be as neutral, non-partisan, and factual as possible. So on Monday, the 25th of May, Dominic Cummings, chief advisor to UK Prime Minister since July 2019, stated the following. On Friday, 27th of March, he drove from his home in London to Durham to stay in an isolated cottage at his father's farm. For those of you not familiar with Britain's geography, this is a 4 to 5 hours drive. This is not close at all to where he lives. On Sunday, the 12th of April, he drove for roughly 30 minutes to Barnard Castle town to see if he could drive safely back to London. This is his excuse. Barnard Castle is a town that is a picturesque town that people visit to see the area, basically, a touristic place. And what we don't tell them here, but it was actually the case, was his wife's birthday. Now the counter treatment, the 3 first sentences are exactly the same, but we also tell them on Thursday, the 30th of April, we asked 299 people living in the UK to answer if they only go outside for food, health reasons, or work, if they cannot work from home. The participants had different ages and income. 85% of them answered that they agree. So we give them the descriptive norm from the first round of the experiment. And what happens? Now, you see again that there is discrimination against non-compliers. But when we break down the difference between the amount you sent to a complier and the amount you sent to a non-complier, you see that they, in the break treatment and the counter treatment even more, they differentiate between compliers and non-compliers less. Okay. Dictator game, though, there is no difference when you break it down by condition. Of course, dictator treatment doesn't have a strategic element.
I'm sorry, Cyril, you have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm well on time, thank you. Okay, and the last one, the public good game. Okay, again, we see some discriminating behavior, but when we break it down by treatment, we see that the counter treatment is again very different to the baseline. They discriminate so they treat compliers and non-compliers more similarly in the counter treatment. And here are the regressions. You see that for the break treatment, the effect is weakly significant for the trust game. It's not significant for dictator game or the public goods game. But for the counter treatment, it is negative and weakly and strongly significant in the public goods game and the trust game, nothing the dictator game. We controlled for their vote in the general election, which was in mid-December, so roughly 6 months before the experiment took place. This is this column, the third, sixth, and ninth column. And if anything, when you control for partisanship, the effect becomes stronger. Now, we also used the Google mobility data to see if this behavior had spillovers outside of the experimental setting. So these are the graphs of the regression continuity. 0 is the day that the Prime Minister announced, the day the Prime Minister defended him in public. This is the day where information about Cummings peaks. And you see that there is a clear change in the behavior. You can also take 7 days around the discontinuity. You see again that people go out more to parks. They also go to residential areas more, go out to grocery stations. They go less to the workplace. So let me give you the results here from the regressions from the discontinuity. You see that they're all strongly significant. And let me tell you that we control here for the temperature, population density, ratio of age under 18 in the population, ratio of age over 50, what they voted in the Brexit referendum, again as a control for partisanship, growth of GDP per capita, the daily toll, and the population density. Oh, and very importantly, these data are 150 regions in the UK. It's not just one time series, it's a panel. And also we control for region fixed effects. So let me go back. So we do find some evidence that the leaders' misbehavior affected people's actual behavior. How much time do I have? Okay, let me go quickly through this.
About 1 minute.
Okay, so very quickly on this. This was not the first time a leader misbehaved. There were 2 minor incidents before that. But this time, the people who misbehaved, they were forced to resign very quickly. They apologized. And what we find is that this behavior, the chief advisor's misbehavior is significantly qualitatively different from the other 2 minor incidents in the Google mobility data. So to conclude, we study a natural experiment of a leader violating a norm. In an experimental setting, we show that reminders of the leader's violation have a weak effect. The effect is stronger when combined with a reminder that contrary to the leader, the people were abiding by the norm, which to us, it wasn't clear before the experiment that it was going to be the case. And using Google mobility data, we find evidence that the behavior changed after the revelation of the leader's misbehavior. And that's it. I think it was on time.
Yeah, perfect time control. Any questions? We have 5 minutes for questions.
I have a question to you. So can you say again when the baseline was conducted? Because I mean, I understand that this is a baseline and that you have something that's a treatment that's afterwards. But the baseline baseline was conducted, I guess, in a different era, right? But they're still learning about the COVID crisis.
It was conducted on the 29th of April.
Okay,
So it's essentially a month before the second round.
I see. All right.
It's 1 month and a few days after the lockdown started. But the first round is mostly important for us to establish the norm, to use the result from the first round for the norm in the second.
And it's could you interact the your regressions? Could you interact the independent variable with the voting behavior to see whether labor moves or conservative moves more?
I have done it. I don't remember. I don't remember what the effect is, but one issue we have, and I think we are quite upfront about it, is that we probably don't have that much power for these things. When you go to those who told us what they voted, we only have 170 people, and you break it down that by 3, it's not that the power is not that great. And actually, there is a good chance that the reason you don't find statistically significant effects for the break treatment is because the effect is not that as strong enough to capture it with the power we have. Okay. Someone else? Anyone else?
So I have a quick question. So so I want to like how long is the I didn't follow very well. Like how long between the first round and the second round? Because this is
1 month.
a special period, and so this COVID things may have some influence on people's thinking. Like like it's been 1 month, and most of the people are staying in the home at that time. Well, that is probably out of control in this study, but I'm just wondering if there any influence on the conclusion here.
Well, there is a first of all, our results come from the second round, so we're comparing people who were asked at the same time under the same conditions. They just got different information in the beginning. There is some evidence that people were slowly starting to move out more between the end of April and the end of May, but not that much more. There is a jump at around the time that the misbehavior was revealed in the press.
Okay, thank you. There any more questions? We probably can have one more if there's any.
No, I can stop sharing and you can proceed, I guess.
Okay, so we can go to the second presenter. Wenjing on truth-telling, lying, and guessing, an experimental study on incentivized. I just blocked my screen. On incentivized information reporting behavior. Okay, please.
Okay, could you see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. And let's get started. Okay, hello everyone. I am Huang Wenjing from Tsinghua University, and it's a great honor for me to attend this conference and report our recent research. The topic is truth-telling, lying, and guessing. It's an experimental study on incentivized information reporting behavior. And I cooperate with Professor Jamie Liang and Professor Zheng Jie. What we focus on is 3 different types of behavior in information reporting process: telling the truth, telling a lie, or making a guess. And we wonder how information affects different reporting behaviors. And there are 2 dimensions of information: the input and the output. That is, the information received by individuals, which can be divided into different types, such as full, partial, or no information, and the information reported by them, which can be restricted by different reporting formats, such as in certainty or in uncertainty. And the information manipulation is very common in the economy, whether in the stock market or in the news medium industry. People make behavior dishonestly for their own benefit. And the research on these behaviors can help us have a better understanding of the operation of economic activities and even propose some solutions. We sorted out the relevant literature and find that the studies on lying, especially the lying aversion, are very sufficient, which provides a theoretical basis for our research. And we find that there are also some studies about the impact of the information, the language strengths, and the uncertainty on the moral behavior. As for the framework of experimental design, we discussed about the single person, the individual decision making, rather than the multi-person interaction. So our design is much closer to the dictator game. In general, in our study, we consider an incentivized information reporting behavior to study how information environments and reporting format influence the individual's reporting behaviors. And compared with the past literatures, we develop a deeper exploration into the influencing factors, and also we refine the different types of individuals' behaviors, and we include the guessing behavior. Before proceeding with more specific explanations, let's have a brief preview of the results we obtained. Firstly, the psychological costs of different types of behavior are different. For example, the psychological cost of guessing is between that of truth-telling and lying. And secondly, the reporting behaviors varies across different information scenarios and also in different reporting formats. And in particular, there exist 2 opposite factors influencing the probabilistic reported results, which make the average payoff in this format a little lower. And I will introduce these results in more details afterwards. Firstly, let's have a look at our experimental design. We assume that there are 3 different truth states, and the level of truth state corresponds to the level of payoff: high, medium, and low. And the information about the truth state may not be perfect, but it must not violate the truth state. And different information scenarios will appear with equal possibility. As for the reporting format, we have 2 forms. In the deterministic report, participants have to choose from 4 options: H, M, air, or I don't know. And in the probabilistic report, they are asked to input the possibilities for the occurrences of these 3 different states. And during the actual operation of experiment, we use the letters ABC to represent H, M, and air. And this graph shows our principle, the principle of our design is that the participant may receive a piece of information about the 2 states. Then they make an individual reporting decision in their own brains, and then make a report to our information receiving system. Their payoffs are only related with their reported results and have nothing to do with whether they lie or not. Then this slide shows the mapping relationships from the state to different information scenarios. Take the high state as an example. If the truth state is high, then the participant may receive 4 information H, or partial information, not M, not air, or no information, just blank. And Let's have a detailed definitions of the types of behavior. In the age scenario, if you report age, we define it as truth-telling. If you report am, air, or I don't know, it's a lying. And in the not am scenario, if you report age or air, it's a guessing. If you report am, it's a lying. If you choose to report I don't know, though not very accurate, we define it as truth-telling. And in the no information scenario, if you choose to report age, am, or air, it's a guessing. If you report I don't know, it's a truth-telling. So we can conclude that there are 7 different scenarios in OR: age, am, air, not age, not am, not air, and blank, which means no information. Here, this slide shows the example of experimental interface. The picture shown on the left represents the scenario of C information. And in this case, C represents a low state, and this is a deterministic reporting format. If you report A, you can get 3 coins. If you choose to report B, you can get 2 coins. If you report C, though it's a truth-telling, but you can only get 1 coin with no rewards or no punishments. And if you choose to report I don't know, you can get 1 or 2 or 3 coins with equal chance. And in the picture on the right, there is a not C scenario, which means the true state is A or B. And this is a probabilistic reporting format. You have to input the percentages of A, B, C. And the payoff of this question equals to the sum of the proportion of each option multiplied by its own benefit. The theoretical framework of our design is very simple. That is, the utility of information reporting behavior is determined by both the monetary incentives and the lying aversion. And we assume that the monetary incentive depends on the different levels of state. And the psychological costs are different among different types of behaviors and also different within the same type of behavior. Through calculation and derivation, we can draw 2 main predictions. The first one, the results reported by individuals are related to the information provided. And here shows the details. And the second one, the types of individuals reporting behavior are affected by the reporting format. When the reporting format changes to probabilistic reporting, the behaviors of individuals may make an adjustment to maximize their utility. And our experiments were implemented at the end of March and May in this year. And we have collected the reported data of 62 Tsinghua students. This picture shows the distribution of their payoff. Then let's go on to the analysis part. Firstly, the reported data we have collected support our hypothesis very well. These 2 pictures on the left shows a comparison of reported results with truth-telling. The green bars represent the reported results if all the participants tell the truth. And the blue bars shows the actual reported results we have collected. And here we can see the report of age, am, air, and I use R random to represent I don't know. And we can see that there is a significant deviation between the blue bars and the green bars, because people tend to report the high state to get a higher monetary return. However, from this table, we can find that the number of participants who always reported age is limited in every treatment. So the monetary incentive and lying aversion both play a role in this behavior. Next, the different reports under 7 different information scenarios. Here we list the reported results under 7 different scenarios. And as our prediction says, the types of behavior under different scenarios can exhibit various patterns because of the existence of lying aversion. Next, when we focus on the same report under different information scenarios, such as the report of age, we can find that the average numbers of reporting age are different under these 7 different scenarios. And we can conclude from the observations that the psychological cost is in direct proportion to the gap between the reports and the truth. And the following are the specific explanations. Let's have a look. Firstly, look at the scenarios where the information is age, not age, and blank. Reporting age belongs to the behavior of truth-telling, lying, and guessing. They are at the same level of monetary incentive, but it's clear that the average numbers of reporting age are different among these 3 different scenarios. So it indicates that the cost of guessing is between the cost of truth-telling and lying. Then, in the scenarios where the information is N, not N, and blank, especially in the last 2 scenarios, reporting age belongs to guessing, but the average number are different in these 2 scenarios. That is because when the information is not N, the objective possibility of appearing age equals 1/2. But when there is no information, the possibility of age's appearance equals 1/3, just 1/3. And this finding can also be confirmed in our partial information environment and no information environment. And I just skip this part. Then in this picture, we can observe that these 3 sets of bars are relatively low in this picture. Because when the information is M, air, and not age, reporting age belongs to lying. That is the same types of behavior. This is because the psychological cost of lying is of the highest. Next part is the different reports at the same type of behavior. These 3 pictures shows the average number of truth-telling in the full information environment and the average number of lying in partial information environment, and the average number of reporting I don't know, that is the truth-telling in not full information environment. The truth-telling behavior appears most often when the truth state is high or no information is provided. And when provided partial information, lying happens the most if the high state is excluded. Then at the same payoff level, that is at the deterministic format, reporting M or reporting I don't know can bring the same level of expected return, but they show the different reporting patterns. In this picture, the green bars represent the report of M. The blue bars represent the report of I don't know. And participants tend to report M when receiving M and to report I don't know when receiving no information. When H is excluded, M or I don't know are also likely to be reported. So their behaviors show a balanced trade-off between the monetary payoff and the lying cost. In this part, as I have mentioned earlier in our experimental design, each state can have a mapping relationship with 4 different scenarios. And here I have listed all the scenarios here, and I have highlighted the average number of truth-telling. It's clear that the reported results are much closer to the truth if the truth state is higher or the information is more complete.
Sorry to interrupt, you have 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. And the last part of our analysis is the influence of different reporting formats. We have been analyzing the reported data of these 2 different formats as a whole. And now I want to separate them and make a comparison. In the picture shown on the upper row, we can compare the distribution of their payoff, and I use blue bars to represent the data of deterministic format, and I use gray bars to represent the data of probabilistic format. To put it simply, I just note D and P to represent deterministic and probabilistic. And after testing, we find that the average payoff is higher in the D format. And to compare the overall reported results in these two formats, at an aggregate level, the participants report less age in the P format and tell more truth. Then from the individual level, we can get more details. When the information is air, here we show the reported results of each individuals. Here we have 62 individuals altogether, and each bar represents the reported results of one person. And the positive axis represents the data of P format. The negative axis represents the results of D format. And the report of age is in blue, M is in green, and air is in gray. When people report H, M, or air in the D format, I just use 100% of this color to represent it. If they choose to report I don't know in D format, we can see that these three colors account for 1/3 each in the negative part. And the positive part, in the positive part, it just shows the percentages reported by the individuals. And we can find that when the information is air, the gray zone about the true state is much bigger in the P format. And some participants who report age or I don't know in the D format will turn to report the true state about air. Then, when the information is not air, we can see that there are more M reports and less H reports in the P format. When there is no information, we can see that there are more H reports in the P formats. So we can conclude that it indicates that the psychological costs are different in the same reporting results of these two different formats. The same results in these two formats have to be categorized into different types of behavior. And after combining the results of the whole and the individual, we can find that there are two factors at work in the probabilistic format. The first one can help increase the participants' payoff because they are given more incentive to optimize their reporting strategy. And the second one may decrease subjects' payoff because they bear a greater psychological cost when they input the possibility rates. Here, the last part is about the different classifications of behaviors in these two formats. As I mentioned earlier, it's very easy to judge the behavior types in D format, but the boundaries between different behavior types in P formats are not very clear. So I listed here the behavior types results of P formats from tolerant criteria, moderate criteria to strict criteria. And I compare these three sets of results with the results in the behavior types of D format. Then we can find that the guessing behavior in D reporting is more likely to be classified as lying behavior in the probabilistic reporting. Besides, the probabilistic reporting format can provide more room for the information manipulation.
Oh, when you have 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. To conclude, we design and implement an incentivized information reporting experiment, and we have found a lot of interesting facts. For example, the behaviors of individuals are motivated by both monetary benefit and lying aversion. The psychological cost is in direct proportion to the gap between the report and the truth. And importantly, the same report has to be classified into different types of behavior under different scenarios and also under different criteria. So the above is the main part of our research. We have also done other work in progress. For example, we compare the gain and the loss domain to find out more details. Also, we explore the effects of other external factors, such as the reward or punishment, and the influence of positive or negative language guidance. And we look forward to sharing these results with you in the future. So thank you all and hope to get your suggestions.
Okay, sorry. So maybe I missed this out a bit. Under the full information, I'm just wondering, under the full information, when someone sees an L, right, do they more often select I don't know, or do they more often select H?
Okay, we can have a look at this picture. Maybe this one.
Okay.
When they receive air,
Mm-hmm.
they most of them may report air in the probabilistic format, and in the deterministic format, maybe more participants would choose to report H, because although it's a line, but it can give them a higher monetary return, and little people will choose I don't know. Because
Okay.
in this case, I don't know is also a lie, which costs them more.
Actually, that I'm quite surprised because I would imagine that people might use I don't know to mask their lying.
Sorry, I didn't hear.
I I would have imagined that people would more often use the term I don't know because when you use I don't know, you turn the situation to a lottery. So you might use a lottery to mask the fact that you're trying to extract more gains.
Okay. So thank you for your suggestions.
No worries, I'm just thinking. Oh, since we're at it, in the probabilistic setup, how do they say I don't know?
In probabilistic format, they have no option of I don't know. They just present their possibilities by input the possibilities ratios. We can have a look at this. Sorry, this
So
one.
so saying I don't know is equivalent to saying one third on all possible outcomes.
Actually, in our design, if
Okay, so
maybe
this is not C. So when someone says I don't know, is equivalent to saying 50% on A and 50% on B.
maybe 1/3 of A, 1/3 of B, and 1/3 of C equals to I don't know in the deterministic report. Because
But
I don't know, you can get these 3 different states at equal chance.
yes,
But
but if it's not C, then I don't know should be 50% on A and B, right?
right.
Okay. But that you will have classified under guessing, right?
Yes, we classify it as guessing, and we have different criteria about guessing in the maybe the slides here. This slide shows the different criteria for our classifications for lying and guessing.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I think now is the turn for Lawrence on our groups really more dishonest than individuals.
Okay, thank you.
When you can stop to share the slides, so Lawrence
Okay, I
can.
will stop.
Can you see my slides?
Yeah.
Okay, so thank you. Good morning or good evening, depending on where you are. So thank you for coming down for the Zoom talk. So this is our joint work with Geoffrey Costello down at the University of Vienna and Veronica Green down at University of Erlangen-Nuremberg, where I was previously at. So my name is Lawrence Chu, and so this paper is an ongoing project, and we're gonna look at the Dyro experiment. And I guess because many people might be very familiar with this Dyro paradigm, so I'm gonna spend a bit more time on the motivations. Okay. So to start off, So I was actually relatively new to this truth-telling literature, right? But when I dived into a bit, one thing that really stood out was that in Dairo experiments in particular, groups are often more dishonest than individuals. So what is the Dairo experiment? Imagine that you roll a die and the die can be from number 1 to 6 and you report whatever you observe and you just get money depending on what you report. So you could practically lie on that. So the main finding in this literature that's kind of resonates constantly is that groups are more dishonest than individuals. Now, for me, this was particularly strange. Personally, it was very strange because it doesn't match up with my professional experience. That actually groups are more dishonest than individuals. And in fact, if you think about the literature on microfinance, where microfinance emphasize on the fact that groups help to reinforce everybody's adherence to the loan, it seems counterintuitive to the fact that groups are more dishonest than individuals. So when you dive deeper into literature, you realize that dishonesty is often modeled, especially in the Dairo experiments, is often modeled as harming the experimental's budget, which means to say that the more you steal or the more dishonest you are, the only person other than yourself that's harmed is the experimenter. Now, this we thought was quite particular because there might not be many non-monetary incentives for being honest, right? Why does this matter? Because outside the laboratory, in fact, if you think about outside the lab, when we talk about real world kind of group decisions, right, dishonest behavior actually often harms the third party. And that is very important because of the role of the third party means that there might be non-monetary incentives for being honest. So we thought that, maybe let's look at this literature and we can really start to ask this question. Are groups really more dishonest than individuals when there are not clear non-monetary incentives to be or to behave honestly? Right, so this is what the project is about. Now, oh, by the way, please feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions about the design or the experiment. Now, why? Why does it matter? Why does behavior differ depending on the consequences of who is affected by the decision? Well, the first thing that we have to take in mind is that groups differ from individuals in the sense that group members need to coordinate on their decisions. They need to arrive at a collective decision. All right. Very often communication helps them arrive at this decision. So let's think about a little scenario where there are little non-monetary incentives for honesty. All right. So if you think about such a scenario, what happens? We envision that a dishonest group member, what is a dishonest group member? It's just someone who would act dishonestly if he had acted alone, right? So in such a situation, a dishonest group member might not feel much social stigma with openly expressing preference. Let's go for the dishonest outcome. And if you're honest group members, someone who might act honestly if you acted alone, you're not going to stand firm on the honest. You might not disagree with the dishonest member a lot if it just helps facilitate more efficient decision making. All right. So what you have is a situation where groups are more dishonest than individuals. But if you switch it around and you start thinking about what happens when dishonesty is quite salient. Now, social image concerns might lead to dishonest group members refraining of themselves for expressing concern for this honest outcome. In turn, now the honest group members might feel that there's a need to be more proactive in arguing for the honest outcome. So what you can have now is that a situation where groups may be less dishonest than individuals. So this was the mechanism behind that we thought about. So what we do in this study, we use this design by Coker, Schulte, and Sparting, and this is 2018. It was published in Management Science. In this design, subjects watch a video of a die roll and report their observation. Right? So when I presented this, some people, some audience members feel very uncomfortable with watching a video of a die roll. Now, there was actually a very good reason why we wanted to do this, right? Because we wanted to use this video design because we want to do two things. We want to study people's extensive margin for dishonesty, basically the idea, the proportion of dishonest individual groups, and the intensive margin, which is simply the idea of what do dishonest individuals and groups do. All right, so this is what we do. So this we have for individual and a group treatment. So it's a 2x2 design, right? So on here, these treatments, they differ about who is harmed by dishonesty. Here in the base treatment, which is a replication of Cooker's design, this is the base individual treatment. The base group treatment is just the experimenter that is harmed. And in this individual charity and group charity, it's going to be a charity that's harmed, a third-party charity that's harmed. Now, I'm going to say something about the sample size. So here we have 30 people each, and here we have 90 people in the group treatment, and that's because the group size will be 3. So 3 people make a decision as a group. Now, I mentioned that we use a charity. It's actually, we have thought very hard on what to use, right? So because we wanted dishonesty to harm a third party. So what should this third party be? Okay, should this third party be someone else in the lab? Should this third party be someone outside the lab? So for the first thing that we thought about, it should be someone outside the lab. The reason is that we want to get away from lab norms. Right, is the idea that you might behave in a particular way in the lab because you think that someone else would behave in that way if they were in the same position as you. And we wanted to use a local charity because we wanted to trigger homegrown norms. And we thought that this is the easiest way to have a design whereby dishonesty is unambiguous. And that's why we use a local charity. Now, the local charity that we used is a small charity in Nuremberg. We conducted this in Nuremberg, where volunteers dress out as clowns and they would go and they visit children in hospitals. So it's a very small local charity. Now, people in the charity, individual charity design, they had some time to get to know the charity. So we showed them the webpage of the charity when they did the experiment. Okay, the design. Now, if you're familiar with this Coker et al. Design, you know that there are 3 parts to the design. But for this talk, I'm just only going to focus to part 2, which is the main treatment that we are interested in. So this is the individual base treatment, right? The baseline treatment. This is remember, this is the treatment where the experimenter is harmed. So a player sees a video of a die roll. It could be 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all with equal chance. And his task is to report points. Right? Now, the amount that he gets depends on the points that he reports. For example, if a person reports that he sees 3 points, report 3 points, which means to say that he sees 3, he gets 6 euros. Now, of course, this means to say that you could see a die roll of 6, but yet report that you see 5 points. And this is over-reporting. Now, in the group treatment, what happens is that 3 players observe the same die roll. Okay, and they are each tasked to individually report what they observe, right? So what you have done is that you change this to a coordination game. And to help them coordinate, you can chat for 5 minutes. So if they were successful, each player receives the relevant points, and if they're unsuccessful, each player receives 0. For example, if all 3 players say that they reported 3 points, then each player will get 6 euros. If this is not the case, which means to say 2 of them reported 3 and 1 of them reported 4, everybody walks away with 0. What we do in the charity treatment is as follows. We keep the subject's monetary payoff constant, but now what we do is we introduce some consequences in the donations made to charity. All right, so let's look at this. So in this treatment, the subject, once again, this is the individual charity treatment. So players' decisions only affect their own payoffs and the donations to charity. So you roll a die, you see a die roll video, And suppose that you say that you report 3 points, you get €6, the charity gets 4. So now what we're trying to articulate here or show here is that dishonesty now has some consequences, and the consequences is felt by the passive third party, which is the charity.
Sorry, Lawrence, a quick question. So when the group chat is oral chat or is like text chat or in what other forms?
I think it's through the computer, Z3.
I'm sorry, I didn't. Yeah.
Everything is done online.
So it's text chatting. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. In the group charity, it's the same thing. So now let's see what happens. If everybody reports 3, each group member gets €6 each, and the charity gets €4 from each group member. So the charity gets 4 multiplied by 3. All right. And if the coordination was unsuccessful, everybody walks away with 0 points, including the charity. So if you look at it this way, the base treatment and the charity treatment are isomorphic, with the exception that there exists a charity. Other information, so like we said, this was conducted at University at Erlangen-Nuremberg. It was programmed with Z3. They chat 5 minutes on the Z3 program. And what we're going to study is this. We're going to look at the proportion of groups and individuals that over-report, which this is act dishonestly. And we're going to look at the reported points of over-reporting groups and individuals. And we're going to look at the chat behavior in groups. Now, to have some control over the design, what we do is we pre-generated 10 roles, all right? And we administer to this pre-generation of die roles to our data. So this is really unlucky because we have 20% of the roles that reported 5. 5 is the maximum possible amount that you have. And so they cannot be dishonest, right? But we thought, I mean, there was a great temptation to reject the pre-generational sequence, but groups are more, we decided to refrain from that. So results, okay. So I'm going to show you the base treatment, right? This is the treatment that has been done in most experiments where dishonesty harms the experimenter, all right? So this is the proportion of over-reporting or dishonest individuals, and this is the proportion of dishonest groups. What you immediately see is groups are more dishonest than individuals. So when we saw this, we were like, phew. I mean, it's not good if you start off and you can't replicate the entire literature. So we were quite happy that we saw this. Groups are more dishonest than individuals. Now the question is, what do dishonest groups and individuals do? And this is what you see, right? So this is reported points. Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at people who are dishonest, and we're going to ask, what do dishonest people do? So in the individual treatment, you see that most dishonest people went up all the way for the maximum 5 points. In the group treatment, most dishonest groups went up for maximum 5 points, right? So they tried to extract the maximum possible points. So then
Lars, you have 5 minutes. Sorry to interrupt.
When you think about the behavior of dishonest groups and individuals. All right, so now let's look at the charity treatment. This is what happens when you introduce a charity. Okay, so what you find now is that the individuals and the groups, there is no difference at all. All right, remember, the only difference is that now we introduce the fact that when you're dishonest, you affect a charity. And we no longer find individuals or groups to be more dishonest than individuals. And another thing that you probably observe is that if you take a look at this, even the individual's behavior, there is no difference at all. The most difference came from the group behavior. And this is interesting, right, to us, because it means to say that individual dishonesty, how I behave, does not seem to be influenced by the fact that there's a charity. It's the group that behaves slightly differently, right? So later we're going to take a look at how the groups behave. And what do individuals or over-reporting individuals and group do? So this again is the baseline treatment, and this is the charity treatment. Now, what we do see is that dishonest groups are not dishonest to the same extent as dishonest individuals. All right. So this is the, remember, this is the reported points by dishonest groups. And this is the reported points, the shaded lines, the reported points by dishonest individuals. So dishonest individuals always often just report 5 points, while dishonest groups report less than 5 points. Now what we right. So our thought is this. So right now, if you think about design, everything that we have here in the charity treatment, the charity is unaware of how they're affected. Okay. I should have mentioned this in the experiment. When the experiment ends, we just anonymously donate the amount to the charity at the end of the session. The charity has no idea why they're receiving this amount or whatsoever. All right. So we decided to have what we call a revealing treatment, whereby the charity receives an amount and the charity is informed why they received the amount, and they are informed what do subjects do in it. Through your actions, because they might feel some aversion or disappointment through your actions. And so that was the idea of this. But we didn't get any major effects. Groups, this is the charity, our treatment, this is the proportion over reporting groups and individuals. There are no difference here. But what you do see now is that in this treatment, at least, over reporting individuals, everybody tends to report less. They cheat to the same extent. They cheat, but they cheat to a lesser extent. That's basically that. Something interesting that comes out is that, okay, so we have been talking about this. We have to annotate. We have been talking about this thing here, which is over-reporting. Let's look at under-reporting. These are people reporting less points than they observe. In the base treatment, we get nothing, right? No one under-reports. In the charity treatment, we get some under-reporting, but if you look at this is the treatment where the charity is reviewed. We get some difference between the group and individual, but this is not significant. So we could just, as an observation, that maybe groups become more altruistic than individuals when the charity is harmed. All right. So.
So Lawrence, you have 1 minute.
1 minute. Okay, great. So 1 minute left. Let's look at something here. So, like I said, let's look at the chat data. So we're gonna study we're gonna look at the chat data. We're gonna ask ourselves, why do groups behave differently? All right. So this is the proportion of statements for dishonesty. So we look at the data, we mine the data, we ask how many times a group makes arguments for being dishonest. And what you see is that at least this is comforting. When dishonesty just harms the experimenter, groups almost always make arguments for dishonesty. But when there's a charity or a third party involved, groups makes lesser arguments for dishonesty. And this lesser argument seems to manifest in their behavior. All right, so I'm going to conclude. So we set out to ask, are groups really more dishonest than individuals when there is some non-monetary incentives to be dishonest? We do not find this to be the case. We find that groups are no more dishonest than individuals, and in fact, groups can help moderate the extent of dishonesty. The second thing that we observe is that, so we start to ask, what is the between treatment? Why does it work in the one case, group are this more dishonest than individuals, and not the other? Our results suggest, I repeat this, it just does suggest that there's little to do with individual preference for dishonesty. Instead, the reason why groups are no more dishonest than individuals is that now people refrain from making arguments for dishonesty. Now, I should say there's a caveat to our study. The caveat is this. Now, if you think about our study, the status quo, you can think about it this way. The status quo decision is to be honest. And to be dishonest, you have to deviate from the status quo. All right? Now, there can be situations whereby the status quo is a dishonest outcome, and to be honest, you have to deviate from it. Okay? So in the latter situation, I would argue that groups can be more dishonest than individuals, right? So you could think about this like if the company was cheating, that's the status quo. So to be honest, is you report that the company was cheating. And in our paper that we have, we show that groups are less likely to whistleblow than individuals. So thank you for your time. This is a QR code for a current working paper. If you're interested, I say current because we're currently revising it from feedback from the referees. And this is my email. Do contact me if you have any questions. So yeah, the floor is open. Thank you.
Okay, any questions?
Yeah, one question. You said you have text from the discussions before the coordination, right? Have you analyzed that text to see how it correlates with their decisions later? Like if there are indications someone switches to lying or not lying?
Yeah, certainly. So we did analyze the text. So what we have is the proportion of, so just think about the text as being for a group many lines of conversations, and we can start asking which line corresponds to a lie, which line corresponds to being honest. And of course, what we see is that if there's more proportion for lies, people tend to lie, or the group tends to lie.
Okay. Is there any evidence of switching from lying to not lying? Like someone's persuaded not to lie?
Okay. So we did not
Okay.
we did not mind that in that great detail. Okay, but we should take persuasion.
Any other questions?
There's
I have a
the chat
question.
group. So, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I have a question here. So, in your experiment, you found that individuals are cheating in the same way, in the same level, regardless of the victim type. But there is another paper, so they compare the victim of an experimenter versus another subject, and they found that people lie more to the experimenter. So I think that combining your results to those results together, it's quite interesting that when it's an experimenter versus a charity, people are behaving in the same way. But comparing an experimenter to an individual, then they lie differently. Like, do you have any idea on these different results?
And do they do the Diaro experiment? This paper by Sopera, Wissel, and Ploner, Matteo Ploner.
I think they use the Diaro for 10 rounds.
So I have to admit I'm not familiar with the paper. I will check it out.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting. Maybe it's about like institute versus individual. While in your experiment, they are all institutions. Maybe it's my guess.
So I'm reminded. Okay, maybe I have like 20 seconds left. I have the remember of the original paper by Fischbacher, the Diaro paper, and in his Diaro paper, he also had a treatment whereby lying affects another individuals, and what he does find is that there's no differences in individual lying behavior.
I see.
But thank you. I will take a look at this paper. Thank you.
Yeah. That paper, they also study their individual characteristics to look at the heterogeneity.
Okay.
Okay, so Lawrence, your time is up. I actually have some questions, but I guess we can talk later. Okay.
So I'll tell you in 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and 1 minute.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'm going to talk today is our study about business drinking. So I have been working on this for a while, and I'm going to report some findings we have for our very first experiment on this. And I'm Jianxin Wang from George Mason, and this co-study with Dan Hauser, who is also from George Mason. So we started this project because we observed that in China and generally in East Asia, we find that social and business drinking is quite prevalent, and people engage in those type of activities a lot. And it seems that business drinking have been evolved into a social norm. So here I quote from the book called The Chinese Way. Many Chinese people believe that going to dinner parties and drinking is required to develop both personal and business relationships. So this is of course not to say that like everyone engaged in this type of activity, and this is also not like people do this in every region in China. But by my own experience, there are some industries at least they are involved into the business drinking a lot, like state-owned firms. They account for a large part of the China's firms, and they often will engage in this social and business drinking a lot. So for those who are not very familiar with this culture, I'll show you some pictures to give you some sense. So this is a picture from the book, The Chinese Way. What the picture shows is a typical drinking activity, social drinking activity in China. So people will drink together, usually at the dinner, and sometimes I guess at lunch before anti-corruption. So usually it's at dinner, so people drink and eat together, and they will drink a lot during the dinner often. And there's one big difference, I think, between the East and the West of, regarding the drinking culture, is that so if you are in this environment and you resist to drink, you will face some pressure in at least in China. So, but this is quite different from the West. And this is also true in young people, like college students. Like what this picture show, those young guys are drinking together, and I believe they are shouting out like, drink it up. So this drinking culture is the truth, and you can, if you are familiar with the culture in China or maybe like Korea or Japan, they do engage a lot in the social and business drinking. Well, however, there are not much papers on this business drinking and its potential implications are untested. So the question is, what values does drinking bring to business environments, or maybe what harms that they bring to that? So this is not very clear. And so in this very first piece, we focus on the alcohol effect on cheap talk communication, and particularly on promise making and promise keeping. So that's what we are trying to study in this one. And I'm going to introduce two branches of literature which are closely related to our study. So we actually build our models based on those two pieces of papers. So the first one is the alcohol myopia model. This is developed by psychologists Steller and colleagues in 1985, 1990. So what this model suggests is when people are drunk, that will block a form of response conflict, which is called inhibition conflict. So that means if you are drunk, and that myopia will allows the influence of only salient cues, but reduce the influence of inhibiting cues and the meanings. And those inhibiting cues often require further processing to access. So I'll give you an example here, the aggressive behavior. So when people are drunk, they are more likely to behave aggressively. So why is that? The explanation from this alcohol myopia model is that if you're drunk, the inhibiting cues, which actually inhibit you from behaving aggressively, is blocked. And what is the inhibiting cues is the consequences if you behave aggressively. That is, so you may be punished, or maybe even being thrown into prison, or you may be like beaten back by other people. So those are the consequences that will happen in the future after you behave aggressively, and that will inhibit your behavior if you're sober. But when you're drunk, that is blocked, so you will behave more aggressively. So that's the application of this alcohol myopia model. So yeah, so the key thing here is if you're drunk, those inhibiting cues will be blocked, and those inhibiting cues are often things that need to be processed further and usually happen in the future. Okay, so that's for the myopia model. And the second piece is the guilt aversion, which you maybe are more familiar with because this is from behavioral economics. So the guilt aversion said that if you believe you let others down, you feel guilty, and communication and especially promises will increase this guilt. So for example, in Chinese and Duffenberg's economic trick by paper, they find that in the trust game, if the trustee promises to the truster that she will behave kindly, then that will increase the trustworthy behavior, because when she makes a promise, she believes that she will let the truster down more if she breaks the promise. So that enhances the guilt from the trustee. So that's the guilt aversion. So if by the way, if you have any questions, you can especially quick questions you can ask during the talk. So based on those two pieces of papers, we can now introduce our own model and predictions. So we study this in a prisoner dilemma game with pre-play communication. So this is a standard PD game. So the payoff here, the Q is the punishment payoff when both choose to defect, and T is the temptation payoff if you defect the other culprit, and S is the sucker's payoff, and then R is the reward payoff if both cooperate. Okay, so we built our model by combining the guilt aversion and alcohol myopia we just introduced, and we call it GAM model. So in this game, there are two stages. In stage one, the paired people communicate with each other, and they can decide whether they will make a promise or not to cooperate. And then in the second stage, they will play the real PD game. They make the real decision on whether they will choose to defect or cooperate. And if you made a promise, then you should decide whether you will break the promise or keep the promise. And the communication, of course, is non-binding. So that's chip talk. So in this game, there are three possible strategies for each player. You do not make a promise and then choose to defect. And you make a promise and then choose to defect. And you make a promise and then choose to cooperate. Here we ignore the case that you do not make a promise and cooperate. That's not likely to happen in rational players. But that, of course, doesn't impact our equilibrium. Okay, so there are three strategies, and we actually try different approaches to try to find the equilibrium. Here I'll show the most simple way to how to find the equilibrium in when people are sober and drunk. So here let's start with when both players are sober. So when players are sober, when they if they play no promise and defect, or if they play promise and cooperate, then that will be, the payoff will be the same as the standard PD game. That is just the material payoff. But if one makes a promise and then choose to defect, this is where the guilt jumps in. Because you make a promise and choose to defect, then that means you break the promise. And by the guilt aversion, if you break a promise, you will suffer from the guilt. And then that will generate a negative psychological utility. So when you make promise and defect, there will be a negative utility here. And depending on the opponent's strategy, there will the guilt level will be different. So for example, if the opponent chooses to no promise and defect, and then it should suffer a lower level of guilt. But if the opponent makes promise and chooses defect, it should be higher than that. And then if if the opponent makes a promise and chooses to corrupt it, that in that case, you will suffer the most guilt. But anyway, you should suffer from some guilt if you breaks your own promise. Okay, so then in this matrix, it's easy to find the only equilibrium here is no promise defect and no promise defect.
You have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So now let's say if both players are intoxicated. Here then this alcohol myopia effect comes in. So let's think about this guilt. This is something that will happen in the future, because when you are communicating with each other, this is just, you don't feel the guilt that much, because that you suffer from the guilt when you make the real decision, when you choose to defect and break the promise. And also that effort, I believe needs some effort to process, because the guilt actually, like for example in Chinese and Duffenberg's paper, that it actually depends on your second order belief, which is need to spend out some effort to think about it. So that guilt is quite similar to what the alcohol myopia model suggests. So here we argue that if you are intoxicated, then that guilt, which actually inhibit you from breaking the promise, that inhibiting cues is possibly blocked. So here you can see all those negative utility generated from guilt disappeared. So there's only a material payoff for each strategy. And then in this case, there could be multiple equilibria here. The reason is because people are indifferent from, if you are intoxicated, you are indifferent from no promise defect and make promise defect, because the guilt aversion is blocked. So there could be 4 possible strategies, the combination of no promise defect and make promise defect by the 2 players. Okay. So then if one player is strong, the other one is sober, that is like in between. The intoxicated player will be indifferent between no promise defect and make promise defect, and the sober one will be the same as the sober case. So there are 2 equilibria here: no promise defect, no promise defect, and make promise defect, no promise defect. Okay, so that's the equilibrium. The difference of the equilibrium between sober and intoxicated people, and is that okay? So if from those equilibrium, we can see that that if you are sober, and then in the equilibrium, they never make promises. So there is always no promise defect. But when people are intoxicated, then it is likely that at least theoretically make promise are in the equilibrium. So it is so we can predict it is more likely for the intoxicated people to make promise than the sober people. Okay, so but there are some gender difference for this myopia effect. Previous evidence show that males are more sensitive to alcohol myopia than females. I didn't show the detail here because of time limit, but there are studies showing this. And so because of this gender difference and what we just conclude from the equilibrium, we have our hypothesis for promise making. Intoxicated males are more likely to make promises than sober males, but there should not be such difference in females because they are less sensitive to the myopia. And then for promise keeping, it's relatively easier because so there should be no difference for promise keeping behavior between the intoxicated and sober groups. And the reason is that so there are 2 reasons. The first reason is as you just saw from the equilibrium, in the equilibrium, people always choose to defect. So theoretically, there should be no difference in terms of defect, which is the same as promise keeping if you made a promise. And the second reason is when you decide to keep the promise or not, that actually happens in the second stage. So in the second stage, guilt is a more direct consequence of breaking a promise. So that is less blocked by the outcome myopia. So that's why we hypothesize that there should be no difference in terms of promise keeping between the two groups, either in males or females.
There's 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. So let's go through the experiment design quickly. So as said, we use the PD game with free-form play communication, and those payoffs here are the real payoff we use in the experiment. And before making decisions, those paired subjects will communicate with each other for no more than 90 seconds. Use online chatting software. So this is yes, text communication. And we did this in a lab in the field experiment. So we recruit participants in the bar or barbecue restaurants near university campus in China. So for those who are not familiar with barbecue restaurant, it's similar to beer garden in the US. And people often will consume alcohol in that type of restaurant. And we recruit same number of participants at two different sets at the same time in each session. And then we randomly match those two groups into pairs to play the game. And here I would like to say that we actually didn't randomly control their alcohol consumption. So because we want to, we think it's interesting and want to take advantage of this, that they are drinking themselves, then we ask them to be in the experiment. That will be more like in the real drinking environments. So, but what we do see that we do think that is causally randomized of alcohol consumption, because we always recruit people with there are alcohol beverage on their table in front of them. So at least that indicates they all are willing to drink. It's just maybe they haven't started drinking yet, or they have something to do that night and cannot drink. And we also compare their characteristics, and there are no differences. And this is so we measure their body alcohol content using a breathalyzer, and this is the actual one we used in the experiment. And so the last thing here is those messages from the communication are natural language. So we need to classify them into whether they made a promise or not. So to do this, we recruit recruiters to the lab and then ask them to classify messages. And we use a coordination game by Xiao and Hauser. That is, we reward those whose classification result is consistent with the majority in that group, so that they will be serious on this classification job. Okay, that's for the design. And then now let's see what we found in the experimental data. So we totally recruited 240 participants, and 168 of them were drunk, and 72 of them are sober, and there are more males than females in our sample. Okay, so our first result is for promise making. What we found is intoxicated males are more likely to make promises than sober males, but intoxicated females make a similar level of promise, no matter they are drunk, compared with sober females. So in this figure, on the left are for males, the right are for females, and the blank columns are for sober groups. The dark columns are for intoxicated groups. So here for males, when the males are drunk, they make significantly more promise than when they are sober, and this is like around 15%. And for females, there's even a small drop, but this is not statistically significant anyway. So what we find here for the promise making are consistent with our hypothesis.
Okay, Jiangxi, you have 1 minute left, but we can use your Q&A time.
Okay, I probably can finish in 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. So the second result is for promise keeping, and we didn't find any difference between the intoxicated and the sober groups in either males or females. This is also consistent with our hypothesis on promise keeping. So those are the tests for our model and hypothesis. So we did some other analysis, but because of the time limit here, I only show the two key results that test our models directly. And to conclude, we find that intoxicated males make significantly more promises than sober males, and they keep the promise at the same rate. But intoxication does not impact females' communication behavior. And all of these findings are consistent with our GAM model. Okay, that's it. Thank you. Maybe it's too early to cheer, but if there are any questions, we have, I think we still have some time.
Yes, we have time for questions. Anyone? Okay, so maybe I have a question, which terms to clarify. So in terms of procedure, you went to the bar and restaurant, you pick up subjects, and you got them to play the Prisoner's Dilemma.
Mm-hmm.
And with regards to your results, did you study their decisions in the Prisoner's Dilemma vis-a-vis their promises? I missed that, sorry.
Can you say that again?
Okay, how do you see how do you see whether they make a promise or did not make a promise? Do they explicitly say to themselves?
Oh, okay. So, I probably I should show some of those example messages.
Okay.
You mean how do they communicate with each other when they are
They
talking about?
make a promise. How did they make a decision?
Yeah. So, so the typical way is like one of them will say, so we use write and done in the experiment, which is cooperation. It indicates cooperate. So they will say, I will choose done. Like, can you choose write? Like the cooperate. So the other one will say, yeah, I will choose write. That's the typical way they will, make a mutual promise when they talk with each other, when they chat with each other. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions?
And then for empty talk, it's just they sometimes don't mention that, or they don't reach agreement on whether they will cooperate or not.
If no one else has a question, I have one. It's more about the procedure. Did you have any trouble getting ethics approval for this? Out of curiosity.
Get approval from the RB?
Yeah, because they're drunk, so I assume informed consent there may not be taken for granted.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So you see why, so we start, this is the very first experiment we have done. And so we start from the field. This is one of the reasons, but this is not the main reasons. So if you did this in the field, because we didn't ask them to drink alcohol beverage, so this is easier to be passed from the LRB. So now we are, because we are actually face some challenge from the referees in terms of the randomization issue. So we now start to do that in the lab. That is a big challenge from the RB. So before the COVID, we are fighting with the RB, and I think it took like, I don't know, 3 or 4 months to get it approved to do that in the lab, that we will treat them alcohol. Yeah.
It's not, with COVID, it's not easy, but normally just have some drinks for the class and.
Yeah, so that's there. So there are actually a lot of this type of studies in the lab treating subjects alcohol. It's just not very normal in the econ field, but there are some economists actually, like Ji Peng and Carol Deck. They actually did some lab experiment treating them alcohol. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And is there any correlations between the level of drunkenness they are with the BAC measurement and their decisions?
Do you mean continuous? So what we did here is to just define a dummy variable, whether they consumed alcohol or not, or whether they are sober or intoxicated. Do you mean like continuous?
Yeah, but do you have? I mean, you have to measure the BAC. So is there if there's some correlation between the BAC and the decision making?
By decision making, you mean promise making and keeping? So I don't remember we did the continuous regression or correlation, but what we did test, like, because what we did now is just whether they are intoxicated or not.
Yes.
So what we actually did is like we compare those who are sober. Sober is for sure because it's 0 by BSA. And when they're intoxicated, we exclude some of those who are lightly drunk or even put them into the server group, that will be the same. Our result will be the same in that case. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, then thank you very much. I think we come to the end of the session.
Yeah,